This presentation will present some ideas about hybrid course design for the 7-week term. Transitioning courses from the traditional semester to a 7-week term may require some creative teaching to ensure that students achieve the same learning outcomes. Something that can help achieve this is to create an environment that motivates students to do more learning outside of the class period in which you physically meet. One way to do this is to borrow some ideas from online classes and create a technology-assisted learning experience for students to use when they're not in your classroom in the face-to-face mode. This is sometimes known as a hybrid approach. First key to hybrids is to use your in-class time wisely. In-class time is generally best used for the activities that require interpersonal exchanges, or for situations that have high ambiguity or require dealing with complexity. Some examples would be to use your in-class time in situations where you need to clarify complex topics or deal with complex topics. So a discussion which is fast-moving, which has a lot of potential elements in it, is an example of something that you might want to do in a face-to-face class. Another example is a group project setup. When you're first beginning a group project, there's high ambiguity, and there is the complexity of figuring out the groups and figuring out how you're going to break up the projects and so on. This is something that would be a good thing to do in a face-to-face class where you can physically be there to monitor group process and to resolve complexity as it occurs and as students in the groups have questions. Another time that you would want to use your in-class time most appropriately would be when you're asking students to apply newly learned information or practice brand new skills, especially if you're going to be doing some things like active learning. Here's some examples. So let's say that you're wrestling with topics, you're dealing with some new skills, and you want students to do a simulation or maybe respond to a case study. This is a good thing to do in a face-to-face class because you'll be able to provide immediate feedback to students as they're exercising those brand new skills or they're dealing with those complex topics and trying to apply newly learned information. Any type of group project or group engagement, active learning, for example, is something that works best in that face-to-face environment. The other thing that is really best to do in your in-class time are monitored activities like final exams. The second key is to use your out-of-class time wisely. So those learning activities that you're going to transition to your out-of-class time should be designed to take advantage of the power of online learning and reduce or mitigate some of the problems that are associated with online asynchronous learning. The time that your students spend learning outside of class is usually best used for activities that can be facilitated by the available technologies. They should be also things that can be done primarily asynchronously, done alone, things that require a lot of repetition or which can benefit from individualized pacing. Some examples. If you're introducing new information, for example, you can create a lecture or presentation, provide a reading with a quiz for a learning check. Those are things that students can do individually alone in order to gain new information in these activities. If you have activities or a need for students to memorize things, for example, you could create a quiz that a student could take multiple times after attempting to memorize or learn something. This is a great thing to be done outside of a face-to-face class. Activities where students are going to be practicing learned or at least partially learned skills or concepts where you need lots of repetition and students could benefit from some pacing choices. These are examples of assignments or even some discussions that can take longer periods of time that don't require immediate feedback. Those are things that can be done in that online time. Also, a discussion is great for learning to use new discipline-specific vocabulary. You can create discussions that students can engage in where they have some time to consider, to think, to really reflect on this new vocabulary that they're gaining, craft their best responses, and put them forward for others to respond to. Using your in-class time well, using your out-of-class time well is great, but you also need to make sure that you're connecting the in-class and out-of-class experiences. It's important to do this. This will enhance learning. You may want to conceptualize a learning cycle that begins with students accessing or being exposed to some information related to your class content outside of the classroom and before they come to your face-to-face class. You might provide lectures and readings and learning checks that will help them prepare for the engagement that you're going to design for them in the face-to-face class. So once they've done that, and then come to your face-to-face time, students could engage in activities that will help them understand the information, learn how to apply the information, learn new skills that use that information. Your learning cycle then continues after your face-to-face class with another time of learning outside of your face-to-face meeting with tasks that give students opportunities for more learning checks, more self-study, practicing applying information, and using the skills that they're beginning to gain. As an extension of this model, where appropriate, students should be given opportunities that allow them to connect what they've learned to what they will learn in the future or what they understand about their future career, their new career, their lives, and so on. This really can help with motivation. And these activities, of course, can work both in class or out of class. There are 4 steps I think we can identify for creating a successful hybrid based upon your current full-term class. It's not as simple as just cramming everything from your full term into the 7 weeks. You really need to be intentional about this. We usually use a backward design process, and these 4 steps will help you do this. Step 1, identify your desired results and determine how you'll measure progress. Step 2, categorize any existing class activities and identify those activities that you might be able to move to your out-of-class time or that you think will improve student performance on your measure. You may also, at this time, think of brand new activities to move to your out-of-class time. Step 3 is developing an activity structure for your out-of-class items and then put them online in the course management system. And then step 4, implement your plan, monitor and refine activities to continue to improve your results. So here's an example that I can provide for your consideration. So let's say that an instructor in a business class has decided his students aren't as well prepared for the in-class discussions that they like to have, and they instead are probably skipping the readings that are assigned to them, or if they engage in the readings, they don't really recall enough facts to add substantially to the discussion. So the instructor decides that having students prepare for those discussions outside of class might help them achieve the desired result, which is to have a more substantive, meaningful discussion. A measure for this would be the instructor would create a course roster and then just use tallies next to student names to indicate good participation or substantive interaction in that in-class discussion. So it's just a simple paper recording of student engagement. Step 2 then is to look at the existing class and identify an activity that could be moved. Well, we've already decided in this that there are a number of activities in the class. Some examples might be there's a reading from a textbook. There might be a Business Week article reading. And then, of course, the in-class discussion might revolve around something like a topic of what are the characteristics of good customer service and what are some examples from the readings. Another one is there's a homework task, which is to choose a company from an instructor-provided list, and those companies have an active social media presence. The instructions that are given to students are to review at least 1 month's social media activity and then identify an example of how the company responds to some sort of customer feedback on that social media. The students would then critique their observations with criteria that are in the text and discussed in that discussion. So in this activity, the instructor says, we're going to take the readings, we're going to move them outside of the class as they always are, but we're also going to design some learning checks for those readings, a quiz. So let's look at that, designing an activity structure for that out-of-class item. So to increase the student preparation to participate successfully in the discussion and then therefore gain some skills about how to critique a company's social media interactions with customers, the instructor creates a quiz in JetNet that covers the readings. Now, luckily, the instructor notes that the textbook publisher provides a question bank, which they can import into JetNet. It's a 30-question test bank, and the instructor would then also perhaps write another 5 or 6 questions that they think are especially important, and then have JetNet randomly select 10 questions from the now 40-question question bank to provide an opportunity for students to do a learning check. Decides to make the quiz worth 10 points. It's not a major grade, but it's enough to motivate students to do it. And then to gamify it a little bit, to make it interesting, the instructor sets it up so that the students can take the quiz 3 times, and only their highest grade is recorded. So he builds it as a way for students to improve their grade. All they have to do is do well on the quiz. And of course, they can do the quiz open book. Of course, the instructor creates a time limit for the quiz, which reduces students' ability to do that. But really, what this is designed to do is to dredge students' brains through the content in the readings 3 times so that they can be better prepared for that in-class activity. Step 4, implement and monitor and refine the activities to continue to improve results. So let's say in this scenario, the student does this, looks at the new activity, and then does his tally, and then records some results, like might say, okay, students previously have 42% would engage in the in-class discussion about social media engagement with successful or meaningful discussion topic responses. After this reading and learning check, the instructor notes 67%. Better in performance. So the instructor is saying, how can I continue to improve this? Well, one of the ways might be to increase the maximum number of points, or perhaps allow students to take the test more times, perhaps increasing the number of questions in the question bank. All of those are ideas that could be used as a refinement for this particular activity structure. Again, let's go back. 4 steps: identify the desired results, determine how you're going to measure progress. Step 2, look at your existing class, or think of some other activities that aren't currently in your class that you think that would lead to improved results on the measure you've selected. Step 3, develop your activity structure, put it online. Step 4, implement, monitor, and refine. Some useful JetNet skills and tools that would help you do these kinds of things, these are the ones that we see most commonly used, are importing a question bank and then setting up a quiz as a learning check. Another one is to create an audio recording as a lecture. A third one is to create a video with a PowerPoint like the one you're looking at right now. The fourth one is setting up an assignment that would allow students to engage in an activity and submit something for grading. And then the third one is creating effective online discussions, and JetNet has a variety of tools for doing that. As always, I'm happy to help you with any of these things. I can help you with the technology. I can also help you with some ideas for how to use this technology to structure and teach and design and develop an effective hybrid for the 7-week term.